You're listening to The Voluntary Life, where you can hear ideas for finding freedom in an unfree world. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to connect with the show and hear all past episodes. Here's your host, Jake.
Hi, it's Jake here. Welcome to The Voluntary Life. This episode is a review of the book The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. It's a Skype conversation with a group of friends, and the book is very well known. You can find it very easily on Amazon, but I'll put a link to it in the show notes as well. Here's a brief summary from the publisher. Forget the old concept of retirement and the rest of the deferred life plan. There is no need to wait and every reason not to, especially in unpredictable economic times. Whether your dream is escaping the rat race, experiencing high-end world travel, earning a monthly 5-figure income with zero management, or just living more and working less, the 4-Hour Workweek is the blueprint. So that's a brief summary of the book, and I hope you enjoy the discussion. Thanks so much for listening.
Did you like the book?
Yeah, I like the ideas in it. There's a lot of things to think about, I guess. So you really have to think about lifestyle. One of the things that I thought was most important was when you talk about you have to live your life how you want to live it, rather than kind of like delay living your life for this like future period where you're already like older and can't enjoy things as much. I thought that's interesting. You know, I have to make sure I think about that. Am I doing
the deferred life plan?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Versus like living now. I thought that's probably the most important thing to take away from the book.
Right. Sort of, yeah, to get out of the mentality of preparing for having a good time later, and
yeah, when you're 60.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know, it's what, retirement age is 65 now, and it's going up. So by the time I'm that age, it'll be 70, 80, and it's a bit of a long time to wait.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely thought it was retirement is wasted on the old. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good point.
I really agree with that. I think that's the most valuable thing that I've got out of the book as well. It's not deferring all of this lifestyle when you're old.
I do like the fact that this book, I think, is really about stuff that is personally relevant. It's stuff that you can implement yourself. So I'm curious to ask, has anyone on the call actually taken any of the ideas in this book and implemented them and, had success? I mean, I'm thinking about things like the working from home, things like the outsourcing stuff to virtual assistants, things like the kind of extended traveling and stuff like that. Because we're actually thinking about, we're planning to do some extended traveling, but I'm just curious as to what people have experienced trying to implement the ideas.
Yes, I was actually relieved when I was reading the book because I realized that I had already started to do some of the things that he was suggesting. For instance, like I outsourced my chores, my like housekeeping stuff. I never want to do laundry again, and so I hire Mandrick to do that for me, and he cooks, for me every week, and then I don't have to cook. I just eat the food that he makes, and that's really convenient. And the outsourcing stuff, okay, this leads me to another thing about the book, which was that there were times when I found it hard to focus or like a little bit distracting because he was such an asshole.
Yeah. He's definitely, let's just say his personality shines through on every page.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the audiobook narrator but the narrator was like reading it in his voice, like in this very assertive, like kind of cocky voice. And when he said that he had outsourced, like he had a fight with his wife or something, and he had his assistant in India like send his wife an apology email.
Yeah.
I just was like, oh my God. And then there was another point too where he was bragging about how he got an award for being like the best self-promoter. And it was like, you got an award for being the best self-promoter, and now you're promoting your own award, and yeah. I found that slightly distracting, but I was also relieved to, I guess, understand that I've already started to do some of these things, like like outsourcing certain jobs and trying to automate things as much as possible. It did also, I'm a graduate student right now, And I'd like to make a radical shift in careers after I finish up with that. But it did make me think a little bit short term about negotiating to write my thesis from home instead of coming into the lab, which I'm sure is what my boss would prefer.
Right. What do you mean? He would prefer you coming to the lab?
Yeah, to write it there, but I would prefer to write it in my pajamas, so I'm going to negotiate that once the time comes.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of stuff in this book that frankly isn't original at all. It's kind of useful to have it packaged in one place. But some of the things that he focuses on that, even if they're not that original, but some of the things, I think just as the fact that he spends a lot of time talking about them is helpful. And one of them is the basically working from home as an employee. You know, he really bangs on about that as being a way to get freedom in your life, because you then can control your own productivity and choose to use the surplus time that you have rather than just sitting around in the office waiting for the end of the day, you know. And I think it's a really good point that, you know, you can only do that if you have a very clear agreement about what you're supposed to be doing, what your output is in your job, what success looks like what doing a good job would be. And I think for a lot of people that's difficult because their bosses don't really know what to tell them their job is. They just know that they want them there all day, and then stuff will happen, and then they'll have to do that during the day, right? Yeah. But he's very clear that, you know, you have to just push to get yourself out of that environment, because then you control your time. And I think that's a good point, you know, for people who are in employment. That's definitely a good point. I don't know that it's like he sort of makes the assumption that effectively you can negotiate it, and even if you can't, then just go somewhere else and negotiate it there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's one of the things that is a cool thing to do to get more freedom in your job. Especially, but also, Stephanie, for something like thesis writing, I mean, there's such a clear argument from doing it from home anyway, because it's solitary work mostly. We've got to focus and concentrate. So, you know, you think you win that. You should. You're going to win that argument, I think.
I hope so. We'll see how it goes. But another thing I wanted to mention was his suggestions about email. I found really helpful because I realized when reading the book that I spend a lot of time checking email, and I don't even always respond. Like, I just kind of read it, and then I feel overwhelmed by the volume, and so I go do something else, and it's really not helping. So I think that I could definitely stand to take his advice about only checking email once a day, or he says he responds to them once a week, and I had been kind of doing that anyway, like to a certain extent.
You just spend the whole week checking them and then respond.
I know, but I realized that was ridiculous. So. Definitely can cut some of that out.
Yeah.
Actually, I just realised that there are a few things in the book which I didn't. And that was what he mentioned about, you know, information overload and just sort of like reading the news all the time. And like, you know, I did do like read news, read these different tech sites and you know, checking emails and things. And I did cut that out. I mean, I stopped reading random bits of information. I only read stuff that was relevant. Yeah. And basically it did create a lot more spare time. And I also did the same thing with TV shows as well. About that, and basically getting rid of TV shows, you know, watching lots of TV shows and things. I didn't really need to watch them. It's just kind of like because I had spare time and I sort of did that. When I stopped doing that, it's like I've got all this, more, you know, a lot more time, and then I started using that time for more constructive things, and that's been a big change actually. You know, I've done a lot more stuff with free time, and that's I think that's been quite valuable actually.
Absolutely. David Allen talks about that quite a lot in Getting Things Done as well, like taking a media diet, basically, and just cutting down the amount that you have to process. I remember I used to read newspapers, I used to read like magazines like The Economist, and I used to watch TV news and try and keep up with current affairs, and it was all just pointless crap, and I'm totally happy not every now and again, if there's something really important, he makes the point that if something big happens, Tim Ferriss makes the point, you're going to hear about it anyway. So you don't even need to watch the news, because if it's really big, you're going to hear about it. And if not, you can just get on with doing stuff that's more relevant to you, and that's a good way to actually just take out a lot of the ridiculous political gossip that is just has no real relevance to your life anyway.
Yeah, totally true. I cut out TV like maybe almost 10 years ago. Don't have one in my house, never missed it, and stopped really reading the news like around the same time I got away from all kinds of the political process, and that was awesome. I mean, I just felt such a huge liberation, I guess, from that.
Absolutely. And the same thing, I was just going to say the same thing, like with the news, that, if you need to know, you will hear about it anyway. The same is true of good TV. We don't have a TV, but then when everyone starts talking about a really good series, then we just get the DVDs out and watch it, because everyone says Game of Thrones is awesome, so we check out Game of Thrones, and so basically you still get to see the really good stuff, because it's people are talking about it, and it's worth watching, or it's worth checking out anyway.
And you don't have to wait for the next one to come out. You can watch the whole season at once.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
One thing I wanted to bring up was I found myself wondering and thinking a lot about Tim Ferriss's motivations, or his past, maybe, like when I was reading the book, because he just seemed to have this really pressing need to do everything faster, and also to leave. Whenever he was describing in the beginning of the book, whenever he got stressed out, he would go travel, and that was his outlet, or I don't know, he seemed to have this kind of wanderlust about him. And so I kind of wonder, I guess, what motivates a person to just really be driven to do everything faster, and to go to new places and get on to the next thing, basically.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of manicness in the book that comes through.
That's a good word.
It's very different. For example, you get a totally different vibe reading How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. Harry Brown is so chilled out in comparison, and he's all about maximizing your own time and doing what you want with your life. But it's Tim Ferriss is he's had way too many coffees this morning. The whole book sort of has this intense sense of oh my God, we're going to die. We've got to do stuff before we're dead. It's got this real franticness about it, which in some ways, I think is really a useful kick up the arse if you're stuck in a boring lifestyle that you don't, you're not really enjoying. But it's also, I know what you mean, Stephanie. You do kind of think wow, you're a bit manic, Tim.
Yeah, totally. And I've had friends in the past, or known people who have had that kind of wanderlust, and I don't know, I don't need to psychologize them or anything, but they never find what they're looking for when they go to the next place or the next country or whatever. It's always something that they had to solve within themselves, maybe to address whatever they're running from, or I don't know.
Yeah, I actually had I had similar questions come up for me in the first chapter or so, just around the whole self-promotion issue, and because as far as I listened to the book a couple of months ago now, but as far as I remember, the first couple of chapters are basically him saying, I've done this and I'm so great and I'm that, and look at all these amazing things that I've done.
Yes.
I went to Princeton or some other kind of Ivy League and I've lectured there, and all this kind of stuff that wasn't really that relevant to the book. And after a while I got kind of bored of that, and I started thinking, okay, can we talk about the 4-hour work week now?
Yeah.
Me too. I fast forwarded.
Yeah, instead of
I was taking his own advice. I was only reading the relevant part.
Yeah. And I did wonder, because when I read things like that, and when I listen to things like that, I get this sort of nagging doubt about, okay, why does this person feel that they have to prove themselves so hard?
Yeah.
what is that? And I really got that sense all the way through. Like, I also, I came away having very mixed feelings about the book, because I thought that he made some really salient points. I thought it was really great in terms of being a really motivational book for people who are kind of stuck in this job that they hate and they want a different life, but they don't know kind of practically what they need to do to get there. But I did not like him as a person at all. And yeah, I mean, it left me with a lot of thoughts around, I guess what his motivations were for writing it in the way that he did, and whether, I think it really made me question, because he's selling the 4-hour work week, and it really made me question, okay, well, that's not necessarily a path to happiness, because it doesn't seem like he is very happy.
You mean his lifestyle isn't necessarily going to make you happy?
He doesn't come across as like a secure, happy person to me, because otherwise he wouldn't need to do all the self-promotion and the sort of like grandiosity.
Yes, grandiosity is definitely a good word for it, I think.
And there's nothing wrong with, like, if you're really good at something, and if there's nothing wrong with kind of singing your own praises. But it's just, I think the way that you described him being quite manic is a fair description, and it's just the way in which he keeps doing it almost.
Yeah.
I felt almost I agree with you, Hannah, and I felt like a skepticism that sort of colored everything else he said, because it was just like the introduction, he's promoting himself a lot, and then he's talking about how he had this like supplement company, and my bullshit meter just went beep, 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 beep. And it was like, can I really believe anything else that he's saying? Like he was grossing $10,000 a month or $70,000 a month with no work or whatever, and it just seemed like, okay, he's probably exaggerating based on what he said before.
Yeah.
And do I really trust anything that he's selling here?
Yeah.
On that point, I don't think that his claim to have won that championship, judo championship or whatever it was in China or whatever, I don't think that's verifiable. Like, I looked that up. People like
that was another thing though. That whole judo championship. I mean, he basically won by not technically cheating, but cheating, because he certainly didn't.
Yeah, he got into a different weight category by like dehydrating himself or something.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about
It was
that.
like, don't try this.
But even then, what you're saying, Kevin, is that actually it sounds like it wasn't. It's not clear that he actually even did that.
Yeah, there appears to be no record of any such tournament happening with him as the champion, but I don't.
Wow.
That's what I read, anyways.
And what's really interesting about that whole, just taking that anecdote, is that was one of the things that really struck me about the book, is that he does give some useful advice, but he doesn't strike me as a principled person at all. And again, that kind of fed into my cynicism about the whole book. It's like, well, okay, if he's willing to kind of, skate around the rules in this judo whatever championship that he supposedly won, and he's willing to come out and say that, and he seems to think that that's a really viable way to like win a competition.
And he had this elaborate rationalization for it too. He's like, now some people are going to think this is cheating, but let me tell you why it's not. Like, he really had that planned out.
Absolutely. And it kind of made me think, okay, so what's he doing with this book then? What do I not know about that? How is he cheating me as a listener or a reader? And I think when you read stuff like that, and you kind of get that he obviously doesn't have, I certainly don't think I can say I shared that many values with him, because I would not, I wouldn't enter a judo competition for a start, just flat out. But if I did, I wouldn't sort of, I don't know.
Get yourself in the...
I would be so cold and calculated about the way that I strove to win it.
Well, it kind of makes you think, like, what's the point?
Yeah, absolutely. So it did really...
It's to win, Hannah. You gotta
win. Yeah. So, but that's the point, right? Because on the front of the book, I'm looking at it right now, and the first thing you read is the #1 New York Times bestseller. So it's like, okay, well, if he's willing to sort of, futz around with his weight to get into a judo championship, then what's he willing to do to get on the New York Times bestseller list, right?
Yeah, it does sound like that. The thing of like him embellishing himself all the time. It seems to be the thing of he wants to win. What is it he's winning? We don't know. Can't really define it. Life, like he's trying to do everything to win at life. Not work, win the judo competition, and have the #1 New York Times bestseller.
Didn't he win some kind of like tango tournament?
Dancing competition and weightlifting or something. Deadlift, weightlifting. He does seem very focused at the win.
Yeah,
and willing to do so.
You end up wondering, like, it just seemed like he was really trapped by traditional, like, male gender roles, too. Like, just one of those people who's trying to, like, go along with everything that they think a man should be,
Yeah.
Like, he's trying to prove his worth by how much money he has and how he wins at everything and he's the best and look at me and I have the biggest muscles and whatever.
Yeah.
And that makes me sad.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel the same way. And I think it must be pretty exhausting as well. Like, I imagine that having that sort of constant desire to be on top of everything and be the best at everything and win is incredibly draining, mentally as well as physically.
Yeah, and then what happens if you don't win? You're kind of crushed.
Yeah, I think that's why, for me, that's, I guess, why I've sort of been looking at this book in terms of, okay, well, what can you usefully get out of this, as opposed to, because I don't like him, actually, as a writer. I don't really like him as a person. So what that leaves is like, okay, well, can we get anything?
What are the gems?
Can we get anything valuable out of it, despite his own desperate need to impress and so forth? And frankly, most of the stuff in there is directly taken from other people, like the 80-20 principle stuff.
That's right.
A lot of the stuff about your productivity in work. Even the working from home stuff is not really original.
The travelling stuff isn't either.
The travelling stuff is from Vagabonding, and that I would like to talk about the travelling stuff too, because I think that's really, really good. The one thing that it seemed to be relatively, well, at least I haven't read a lot about elsewhere, is his fixation with outsourcing, especially to outsourcing to country abroad.
That was quite interesting. So I've never seen that.
I've not seen. And virtual assistants in India essentially is his big idea, right? And I think he knows that hasn't been written about as much as everything else, because he really writes a lot about it. And he really goes to town on saying that you should use it for everything.
When he was writing, it was a fairly new phenomenon as well.
The thing is that it's not a new phenomenon for businesses at all. It's really well established for businesses.
Sorry, I meant the online marketplace thing, like freelance and Guru.
Yeah, but for like business to business, it's been around for ages. But he's talking about as a consumer, using it as a consumer, and or even maybe just as an entrepreneur and so forth. Yeah. And I guess, on one level, when I look at that, a part of me thinks, okay, well, certainly, division of labor is great. Outsourcing works. You can see how it works when you go to people close to home and get them to do things like, Stephanie, you were talking about outsourcing your cleaning and cooking and stuff. That all works really well. And we do that as well. We have a cleaner and stuff. It works really well. Works great. But I'm reading the stuff that he's suggesting is such a great time save. And it's like, I don't know, booking tickets or doing something. And I started thinking, really, by the time I've defined what it is that I want, I could have just gone on Kayak and booked that ticket anywhere. I mean, would it really have saved me any time? You know what I mean? It's sort of, there's a lot of stuff that I just can't see.
Yeah, I honestly think he gets off on just bossing people around, and there's maybe I'm just reading into this, but I even got a little bit of a component of racism to it. The way he was saying their names, I had whatever the person's name was, email my wife, and I just tell her what to do and she does it.
Yeah, maybe you're right. There may be a little bit of a payoff there for him, that he gets to tell people that he gets to feel important because he has people working for him.
Yeah, he has this whole thing about how Americans would never be this polite because the Indians are hungry for it and they really want your business, and so they're incredibly polite and they're incredibly subservient, and he loves it because I guess that's one of the things that he really gets out of it.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I wonder if that is why he's focused on it so much. Because I'm thinking, look, if it really made my life better, yeah, I would do that. But what do I really need to outsource? In my personal life, I mean, it's like, okay, maybe somebody would find a better flight price for us for the next flight that we wanted to book, and maybe it would have saved us a little time. But then you have the overhead that you've got to give them the work request, and then they've got to specify what your criteria are, and you know.
Well, it's when you get in a fight with Hannah, Jake, your assistant will send her an e-card.
And maybe some flowers as well. Just FYI.
But if you're so into doing research, like really, what's the best laptop right now, or the best flying ticket? Oh, the virtual assistant would spare me a couple of hours. Because I'm usually trying to go with the best thing I can find. Like, what's the best cost performance ratio for me? And I can, a couple of hours spend on researching things. So that would be a good thing for me, I'd say.
I completely understand what you're saying, Martin, and I felt really conflicted about the whole idea of outsourcing, because I think it brings up slight defenses in me around wanting to do everything myself and be very self-sufficient, and I have quite a strong resistance to outsourcing anything, basically. But the thing about what really struck me about it, sort of examples like the one that you just gave about, if I wanted to buy a new laptop, and it takes me a couple of hours to research the best, surely that'd be better to outsource. The thought that comes up for me about that is that I want to know what I'm getting, because I'm the one that's investing my money in this. And it's almost like a trust thing. It's like I want to be able to trust that I really am getting the best if I'm paying for the best, which is going to be a lot, right? And I don't want to just outsource it to someone that I don't know, who doesn't know me, who, I might tell them what I need and everything, but I won't necessarily... It's almost like kind of outsourcing responsibility in a way as well.
Well, it's your values, because that person who does the research might not value the same things as you do. And also, they don't have really much of an incentive. Like, they have an incentive to do what you told them and get paid, but they don't really have, like, skin in the game, because they're not going to be using the laptop either, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I have reservations about it on that level.
I don't think he used very good examples of what you can actually use this stuff for, because I imagine it's very useful if you've got lots and lots of data crunching type work to do.
Repetitive
work.
Or something, so you've got mathematical problems to solve, lots of them, that's the kind of thing you would outsource. And I was just thinking about what would I actually outsource, because I wouldn't outsource any of my personal stuff, I'd want to do that all myself.
Yeah.
But if those information gathering tasks, which I need to do, like the laptop thing, if they were getting the information for you, like where all the laptops are, what shops you could buy from, and then you make the decision yourself, that would be good. And also thinking of like statistics on stuff. So if you're like in a debate with someone about something particular, house prices in different towns and things, you could get them to do the legwork of
research,
finding towns, the prices and stuff like that.
Definitely.
Or historical dates and things like, other data.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things where, it's like, sitting for hours at the PC just trying to like trawl data. And I think there's a lot of use for that. And I think, there's an angle where it works.
That makes total sense. So, for example, if I want to get podcasts written up, I think that would be a very clear task. It'd be a very, I could write the clear brief. I want a written version of previous podcasts, and that would be a very easy thing to outsource, and there would be a great time saving for me in doing so. Make a lot of sense. But it's he's using the virtual assistant for basically kind of PA purposes.
Yeah, that doesn't really work for that, because they kind of need to be where you are to do that. So I've got lots of paperwork tasks on my desk that need doing, but they can't do that for me.
Yeah.
That's probably the only thing. It's just like not do the actual bits I need to decide for me, but just to organise it into the piles of the different types of things that need to be done. That would be useful, but they're in India. So
having said that, I also think that it is important what Hannah was saying about how I think we all have to be very careful of the I need to control this, I can't give any tasks away tendency. and you see that in work, that it really, everything breaks down when people don't delegate properly, when they don't actually share the load and make sure that they can work with other people effectively. And I think it is really important to try and challenge yourself to what you could outsource. And he sort of makes that suggestion. And I think that's a valuable thing to do, to sort of see whether or not you're kind of drowning in paper because of that control thing.
Yeah, and I did want to say that even though I definitely had some issues with the kind of things that he outsourced, I did find it really helpful to read that chapter, because I've always been quite aware that, or sort of aware just under the surface, that I have this resistance to relinquishing control, basically. And so, for example, I've got a couple of ebooks coming up that I want to put on Kindle, and when you do that, there's a lot of really boring, detail-orientated formatting that you have to do to the file to upload it to the Kindle store. And I've toyed with the idea of outsourcing it, because if someone who is very experienced at doing that wanted to do it, they could do it much quicker than I can. And for a good price as well. But it's been really tricky, and there's part of me who's just like, I really want to do this myself. So reading this chapter has actually really, really made me think a lot more about, like I was talking about earlier, like my own defenses around it, and I think made me realize that you can't do everything yourself. You have to, for business purposes, it's okay to outsource certain tasks.
Yeah, I think I've had the same feeling when reading that as well, like not wanting to relinquish control, or just like not thinking that other people would do a particular task as well. Yeah. And that's kind of like, you have to kind of let go of that. And especially if you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to be able to hire people and get other people to do work for you. Yeah. And granted, they may not do it as well, but they'll get it done, and you'll be able to hire more people, and you'll be able to do more other important tasks as well, which would be more valuable to you than you spending your time doing this thing perfectly. 80-20 rule, they'll do 80% of the quality of it, but it means you've got a lot more time to go and work on something else. I think that's very important. I kind of like the idea of using this to practice outsourcing and kind of trust in sort of delegating tasks to people. I think that's quite important. It's worth practicing, because I'm terrible like that. So
the thing that really strikes me about it is that when you think about outsourcing stuff, you think, I could outsource this. The thing is, though, that I know that I would do it better. And the thing about that is true, right? That you would do it better. But the point you made is also true, that even if you would do all of those tasks better than the person you outsourced it to, it's still an efficiency saving to outsource, because you then get to focus on the stuff that is higher value. And that's that amazing sort of effect of trade, basically, that even if you do two tasks much better than another person, if one of those tasks is higher value for you, it still pays for you to outsource the lower value task. And that's something I think that it is very hard to kind of live that opportunity, because when you think, well, I know I'm going to do this better, it's so hard to let go. And he actually makes a good point in there that it's going to be a bit crap sometimes when you outsource stuff, but just get on with it anyway, and live with that effectively. I still don't think that the examples used are good ones for what necessarily constitutes a useful task for outsourcing, but as a principle, it's certainly true that it's the law of comparative advantage. It works between trading countries or between individuals or anything else. It's basically always better to trade if you have the opportunity to then focus on something higher value. And that's basically, he's just applying it to individuals.
Right. So that's the law of comparative
advantage. Yeah, it's the most well-established law from economics. That it's basically like the fundamental root of economics, which is that trade makes everyone richer. Yeah, and what he's talking about with outsourcing is essentially just trade. Yeah. So just on a personal level.
Yeah.
Thanks for wrapping this up. I'm going to buy a dishwasher. Now I can clean the dishes better, but I'm going to buy a dishwasher.
A dishwasher.
Yeah.
Oh, I tell you, yeah, that's something that I love outsourcing my household chores to machines. Any opportunity to do that is always a winner.
Until the robots revolt.
And about the researching thing about laptops, like I would have to research like 2 weeks to find a good person to outsource my researching to, so I can trust him. So
yes,
that will be also tricky.
And you'd also have to write the spec. You've got to write the brief for the outsourcer, explaining exactly what your criteria are and everything. And he talks quite a lot about how you have to learn how to write good briefs, which I think is a healthy thing to do anyway, because it trains you to think about what it is you're actually trying to do.
Yeah, what's your own brief? What's your self-brief?
Right, otherwise you would, for example, just spend ages looking at laptops aimlessly and not really knowing why you're looking at them.
There's a chapter called Why to Begin with the End in Mind, a cautionary tale. It talks about sort of how he comes up with examples of people that didn't start a new business with the end in mind. They didn't consider, is this scalable? And can I replace myself? And can I outsource this? And so on. And so it got me thinking, like, just spending more time thinking about ways that I could make money, and in a passive sense, rather than stuff that's very labor intensive and only requires my input. Like, what source of income can I think of where maybe I can invent something or create something or put something together and create a service that I employ people to provide that gets customers and gives me income. So it really got me thinking about that in a different perspective. Because before reading this book, I would have thought, ooh, another way I can make money that doesn't involve a 9 to 5. I'll start my own business where I provide a service. And so I basically just replace an employer for me being self-employed. But I wouldn't make that further leap to owning a business that someone else manages. That's like several leaps on. So that it's a very interesting thing for me to think about.
I actually thought that some of his ideas on that chapter were really good. And one of the reasons is that a lot of people write about this in entrepreneurship, about how important it is, if you're going to start a business, to get to selling as quickly as possible.
Yes, you first told me that, and you're absolutely right.
It really is so important if you start a business. It's so, and I've talked about this in previous podcasts on entrepreneurship as well. It's so critical to not spend all this time, money, and investment on R&D and all this other stuff just to get to selling as quickly as possible. And what's interesting about this book is that he sort of pushes that to the ultimate level, which is that he actually sets up websites with nothing behind it except a sales page. And he says, check it out and see whether or not you can actually get people to go through to click buy. And again, I think there's some interesting questions of principle involved.
I think there are legal issues.
He says, I think when he comes through to doing the order, you can't take the money. You have to basically say, we'll get back to you and so forth.
Yeah,
but nonetheless, the point he's making is nothing matters unless people are actually interested in buying this. So there's no point in starting a business unless you've got confidence that people are going to buy it. So, and the ultimate demonstration of that is that you can actually show to yourself that people would buy this. So you think of an idea, you set up the website, and you see if you put some money in advertising, do you actually attract people who would be interested in buying? If so, then you invest in developing the business. I thought that was a really interesting idea.
I think the sort of business principles and business savvy in this book is pretty sound. That's what I got from it. I knew going into it, I've already seen his website. I've seen his video podcasts that he's put out years ago. And so when this book came out, I was like, I know he's not going to be a psychologically enlightened person. I'm just going to ignore that and just ignore the bravado and just focus on his recommendations. And look at the facts of his personal experience, not the way he describes it, just the actual facts. And it is useful, and the advice he puts out there, and the suggestions as well are good. Like rather than providing a service, for example, I could create a guide on how to
do something that you could then resell. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and that's initial input, but I don't need to keep putting work into that. Yeah, it's something that could make money on its own. So
yeah, I think it's really helpful to think that. But I guess that kind of the really key question that came up for me when I was reading this book is: what if you find your work? What if you are offering a service, for example, but that is what is meaningful and fulfilling to you more than the money? Because all the jobs that he talks about are jobs which are basically kind of crap until you can get them to be automated.
I think Tim Ferriss divides up life into 3 areas in this book that he lays out. He's kind of got work, enjoyment, and service. So he's got work, which is like, he's kind of cynical towards work. His opinion, I can't remember where he says this, but he basically says some people will find work that is enjoyable to them, and they would, as you said earlier, like the work you do, Carlos, is the work, this stuff you do in your spare time, even if you didn't have to work.
Yeah.
So, and he's quite cynical about that. He says, like, very few people are going to find that, and that you shouldn't limit yourself to just that goal. If you find it, great, but not everyone will find that. If you see what I mean. So he's quite cynical about that, and he maybe doesn't think that he's going to find one really fulfilling thing that hits the other criteria, which is a service to mankind and the causes he cares about, and is also enjoyable to him. So he's like, yeah, work is just a entirely separate area of life, something to be stoic about. And so in this book, he's like, well, if it's not like a really important service and it's not enjoyable, then let's just minimize it. Let's just get it down to 4 hours work a week.
Yeah.
And that's it. So that leaves enjoyment. And he does say in the book, a chapter about the meaning of life. It's quite interesting. He says basically the meaning of life to him is to enjoy it. That's it. Yeah. And to serve, which is the other area, which is doing
stuff that you think is meaningful.
Yeah, working for a charitable cause to make the world a better place, whether that's philanthropic, which I think by definition is just to do with the good of mankind.
Yeah.
I'm in total agreement with the overall premise that if you want to have a passive income stream which just gives you money, and so you can focus on doing stuff you enjoy, I think that's great. That's a great idea, great approach. Not the only approach, but a really good one to have. The one problem with it is that when I look at the things that he's done, like the super duper brain supplements and the other stuff, I think the point Hannah's making is like, it's a lot of work to get that passive income stream started. Yeah. And for me, I need to really believe in that business and believe that it's something meaningful to me. Like in whatever way, I need to actually feel in order to have the energy to get out of bed and get this thing bloody moving, because any business, any entrepreneurship that you do is so stressful and such hard work that I guess his focus purely on the income generating potential is very rational, and I completely understand it. But I would find it hard to get out of bed in the morning and motivate myself to make some kind of bullshit product like the one that he was selling, Because it was like, I mean, it sounded really semi-fraudulent what he was doing. It was some kind of like, drink this and increase your brain power type pack. And I just think...
Well, Jake, I can explain why you're having trouble getting out of bed. It's because you need some brain quicken to help you get motivated. Just kidding. But yeah, I totally agree with you.
I didn't feel he was necessarily creating value in a lot of the things he's producing. Like supplements, they're well known
wants
to
to
have
make
very
money.
little evidence behind
And
them.
Yeah, he
and
wants to make money. That's his
And
motive.
there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with making money. I think that's a great thing to do. The only problem with it is that you're not going to be very convincing as an entrepreneur if it's all just a scheme to get you to 4 hours a week. Because you just, like, everyone's going to see through that product. You've actually got to provide real value.
Yeah.
Well, I really liked his section about pricing things high because, personally, I thought that was kind of the solution to the whole idea of, like, you know, if you're providing a service or doing something that you love, you know, how can you sort of reconcile it with these principles of, like, also having lifestyle freedom? And it was kind of interesting what he said about, like, most people price their stuff too low, and when you raise the prices a little bit, not only are you, you know, not selling yourself short, but you're also eliminating certain clients that might take up full time to deal with. That might not be such a fun aspect of your job. So I was interested in that.
Yeah. Fire your shit clients, basically.
Yeah, 80%.
I can't agree with that more. That's
Right.
like my experience is that you definitely in business you realize that there are some people who just are they're just total time sinks, and you shouldn't be working with them because they actually cost you money, and it's a hard experience to realize that actually you're just better off not having that client at all.
I've experienced that with freelancing as well, because inevitably the people who are the most demanding and the most unreasonable and take up most of your time are the people who pay the least.
And the other thing that, when you start investigating it, we've also found in my business, we were looking at things like not just the people, the time that the people take up, but things like whether or not they pay you on time. And you find there's always one bloody client who you have to chase and chase and chase, and they just don't pay their bills. And that's the kind of thing that you really need to get a handle on, and tell that client that you want money up front or that you won't work with them again. Because otherwise they just become this awful energy and sort of energy and time sink for you. And so, I think the stuff about firing the clients is fantastic. I have a slightly different experience with his idea about pricing high, and I do understand it. And I think, as an idea, I can really understand where he's coming from. I just had the experience that I actually tried that with my business. I set up a consultancy, and as it was a consultancy, I also was charging very high fees. And basically, for the first year, I got virtually no work. And it was a very harsh lesson in, like, okay, I'm actually going to have to do some work cheap in order to get the presence in the marketplace and people to know that this is worth buying. And so I actually found that I needed to do work cheap to establish a reputation.
So you need a reputation and a portfolio.
Yeah, exactly.
And you need accreditation.
No, there was no accreditation because the field I was in was so new and sort of innovative that there was thankfully no stupid trade accreditation, this, that, and the other. But the point was just that I think it's great to say, like, hey, I'm not going to undersell myself. I'm going to charge I'm going to charge real value for my work and so forth. It's great to say that. But my experience was that doesn't always work. And sometimes actually, what we did was we then got we went to a couple of really good clients, and we basically said, we'll do this work incredibly cheap for you, only as a start in order to establish ourselves, but we want you to provide references and tell people what a great job we did for you. And that effectively then led to a whole lot of other work. But we didn't get a lot of money for those jobs. We just got really good reviews, effectively.
I just want to check I heard you right. So you told the new clients up front that you were doing this work on the cheap in order to get great reviews and build up your reputation in the market. And
basically we said, look, we're new. We will therefore one-time only special offer. You're going to get this incredibly cheap because we want to establish ourselves. And we didn't say, you need to give us good reviews, but we said, we made it clear that we were going to we wanted this to be a reputation building exercise. And they were great. They gave us great reviews and told everyone showed everyone what we did, and it really helped.
Great.
But that was not his suggestion. That was like that was going against the charge high prices type idea.
Yeah.
And I think that just goes back to the point maybe I wasn't making very well before, is that he has very much a one size fits all approach that I don't think is true necessarily. Because I think a lot of it will depend on what your business is and what field you're in and how established you are already in that field, and so many variables that come into it that mean that you can't always take the Tim Ferriss approach to life.
Like, just for example, like one reason why he said you shouldn't price low to begin with and then try and increase it later is that if you've got a lot of repeat business, then a lot of your clients will be alienated and be like, oh, I don't want to charge more. And
you see, that I didn't find that. I actually did not find that at all.
Yeah.
I consistently increased prices with repeat. Most of the business that we had was repeat business, and we consistently increased prices, and people were happy with it.
Yeah,
because they were getting value,
especially if it's done in a very professional way.
So saying it's like the advice in the 4-hour work week is not generic; it is specific for certain circumstances.
Yeah,
and I felt that was quite clear in the writing there. Like his thing was for certain types of products. I did do like business studies. I did it in school and in college, and a lot of the stuff he was talking about was like stuff you do in business studies normally anyway. Market pricing and things for sort of like for the value range of products that he was talking about in the book. That strategy makes sense.
Yeah,
it improves buyer confidence and stuff, and people are going to be less quibbly and things. So I found that for that range of products he's doing, that advice works. But obviously, like you're doing consultancy and stuff.
Yeah,
entirely different. That advice is around.
No, you're quite right. He doesn't talk at all about consultancy. It's much more product focused.
So there was a lot of things in the book which were very specific. So it doesn't. Reading it, I was just trying to extract the stuff that was generic and useful for everything, but the majority of it was specific.
He has quite a clear model in the book of his suggestion, which is fine because you can take what you want from it.
He emphasized like that you can always go back to your old career if you get out of it and whatever his techniques aren't working for you. And I thought that was interesting. I mean, I can't imagine again it being true for everybody, but it kind of made me think a little bit. Like, well, if I get out of science, I could probably get back into it later if I want to. I do think people have fear that like, well, if they change course, then it's irreversible and permanent. But what he said was that the real risk is doing nothing, because then you're going to keep on being, if you're unhappy, you're going to keep on being unhappy with your work.
Yeah, I thought that was great, that section as well, because I think it's absolutely true that people get locked in from school into university to this kind of like, oh, well, I have to do the next step, which is that I show that I've got an increasing length of time spent in each job, and then my CV shows my, that I've progressed up from one position to another and so forth. And I think it is true that becomes such a tunnel vision that people don't even realise that, of course you can go travelling for a year and go back to your job. And you may have to pay for it in terms of the amount of time it takes you to earn a certain level of money again or whatever. But of course you can do it. It's totally feasible.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I know that we've raised sort of several negative points during the call, but I am really glad that I read the book or listened to it, to be accurate, because I think he is very, very good at breaking the traditional mould about how we think about work and jobs and careers. And I think he is very good at expanding horizons and saying, look, all this is possible. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he says about the execution of it or his lack of principles, but the fact that he's actually writing a book that says, hey, look, you don't have to stay in this crappy office job, you can do whatever you want, essentially, I think that's great.
Yeah. Actually, that brings to mind the dancing part. You were saying you went and took dance lessons and things. And it's just like, that was one like particular bit of freedom that he exerted, which I thought was quite brilliant.
Yeah.
Actually, strangely, at that point in time, I was like, I wouldn't ever do dancing. It's a silly thing to do. I do lots of dancing now.
That's great.
But I thought, because he said, he went and intensely did lessons and things, and then became really, really good. So he's competing level at dancing. I just kind of like those are the possibilities that exist, and I just thought that's such a bizarre, weird thing to do. Go and practice dancing and become like competition level. But those are the things you can do with spare time.
Yeah,
and it's just like it's such an unusual idea, but it got me thinking about other things. What can I do with my time? Like learn languages and things. I thought there's some other like valuable things I could do, which are just outside of the tunnel you were talking about.
Yeah.
It's like he was just shining little spotlights on these other areas. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, there's other stuff over here.
Yeah.
It makes you realise how many things you potentially close yourself off to if you're in that tunnel vision mode.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. It's like the book is the 4 hour work week, but what I thought was I don't need to aim for 4 hours. I could spend, like 20 hours.
Yeah, the 20-hour work week.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's good. And that's a much more achievable goal and less risky.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. He's given me like tools and things to help, get the hours down and stuff, but I don't need to be as lean as he is. So I don't have to self-brain quicken or whatever it is. I can make something that's actually profitable, well, not profitable, but valuable to other people.
Yeah, definitely.
Not snake oil.
And actually have spare time myself. Basically, I can profit and other people can profit.
Yeah,
I think that's the way to go.
I wanted to say that, like Hannah, I'm really glad that I read the book, even though I don't particularly like him as a character. I still am really glad that I read the book, and it made me. I was thinking about. I think one of the things I like about the book is that it does, like you were saying, Carlos, it does shine a light on the kinds of freedoms that you can have in our times that you can take advantage of. Like I was thinking the other day, I read this travel guide from 1910, and it had in it about passports, and it said you only need a passport to go to Russia or Turkey. This is 1910, right? You could travel anywhere else without a passport. And this is for Americans traveling to Europe, this particular guide. And of course, we know that in the 19th century, you could also go and just live somewhere else. They didn't have like immigration regulations in the same way you do, and especially with the States, you just show up there and go and live there. And I was thinking about those were the freedoms that they had then. That you could really take advantage of those freedoms, and we don't have those freedoms now. It's not nearly as easy. There are ways to spend longer abroad, but you've got to deal with the whole immigration regimes and all that. But what this book has, I think, is quite a good take on some of the things that we do have as freedoms now that we can really take advantage of. Like, for example, the ideas he has about outsourcing is really utilizing, the kind of connected global economy that we have now for your own personal life, for your own personal freedom. He's like plugging into globalization in a way, And I thought that was pretty cool. And the other thing that we have now is that travel is incredibly cheap in comparison to the past. Even with all of the ridiculous taxes, he's right that you can go off and sit on a beach in Thailand, and it's sort of like it's within a reasonable budget for anyone to like plan to do that. And his point is take advantage of it and go and actually see the world and do stuff. And I think that's like a very positive thing to read about, and to then specifically look at your own life and see how you can apply it. And I think it's there's definitely lots of stuff in there that you can look at and actually think about how you can take advantage of the freedoms that we do have in our lives now that we can really make the most of.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jake. And I would want to add one more thing too, that when reading this book, I realized that like how hard hit we all are with the idea that there's one path to success, and it's very conventional, like go to school, get as much education as you can, buy a house, get married, have kids, and do all this stuff, when there's so much more to life, and it's really important and very great to realize that no, you do not have to follow that in any way, and actually it can be awesome to question all that.
Absolutely. I think that's a brilliant note to end on.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thanks so much. This was fun.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
That's really good.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks, everyone, for coming along, and I hope you have a great rest of the weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, I think you'd really enjoy my book, Becoming an Entrepreneur: How to Find Freedom and Fulfillment as a Business Owner. The book is a no-nonsense guide that demystifies entrepreneurship and provides you with everything you need to break your employee conditioning and become an entrepreneur. You can find the book on Amazon if you search for my name, Jake Desyllas, that's Desyllas, and you can also find out more information about the book on the website, thevoluntarylife.com. Just look under the tab marked Books. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you for listening to The Voluntary Life. If you have feedback about the show, please email jake@thevoluntarylife.com. If you enjoyed this program, please share the podcast with your friends or click the donate button on thevoluntarylife.com.